Okay, so the part of the sequence of play that you play every turn. First thing is build and service ships. Okay. You can build ships into basically anywhere where there's a base. And there is always a huge base on Earth for every nation, essentially. You have to have either a small supply station for LVs 1 and 2, a larger one for LVs 3 and 4. Remember, these are one-shot rockets for the most part. A spaceport for all the REs and CVs up to 2, or a large spaceport for the larger CVs in order to build the ship. And you have to have the raw materials at the base, which is, you know, at the beginning of the game, all your raw materials are on Earth because that's where your cash is. You can't just exchange raw materials anywhere, or, you know, cash for raw materials somewhere where they don't exist. You do have to ship them or produce them or whatever. So in that, it's kind of like High Frontier. A little less weird stuff going on. So like in High Frontier, you have, you know, these weird techs. And that's part of the excitement of the game, right? That you discover and you have to go find the place where you can build this cool new tech because you can't build it on Earth. That's all gone from here. This handles more just a very flat line of the space exploration side of things. Okay, when you unreserve, you have to have at least a small supply station or a large supply station for any CV3 or a spaceport getting larger and larger. And that's just going to cost you 1 supply and 1 fuel. And of course, you can buy those on Earth, as with any resources. Repairing, again, you have to have at least a supply station, and each one can remove a certain amount of damage each turn. 1 for the small supply station, unlimited once you get to the largers. And this is just from CVs. I don't think anything else takes damage. If an RE gets hit, it's destroyed. If it gets intercepted in combat, it gets destroyed. Okay, you can also and you have to pay 1 ore for each damage marker you remove. You can also scrap an undamaged CV if you're at a base or Earth and you end up getting its full value. If it's a damaged one, you subtract for the damage. Oh, you don't get the full value of it. You get half the value. I don't know if you can scrap a damaged one. If you scrap a reserved one, you subtract the difference for the reserve, which is a supply and a fuel. And that could end up getting you the same amount as a full one because you round up. Okay, movement. So this is the part of the game that I kind of know the best. So the first thing you do in movement is the heliocentric transfer boxes. You look at all of these transfer boxes down here, and every single ship slides down 1 box. If it's in the 1 box, it drops down to the flyby. And remember, there's these +6 markers kicking around. I haven't explained them yet, actually. So if you're on the 1 box and you have a +6 marker, you'd lose the +6 and go out to the 6 box. And there's also +12 markers, which work essentially the same way. That's just an automatic game function. You just do that, and it doesn't matter who does it first. Now, beyond that, then you get to planetary system moves. And these, after all the shifts are done, you do in initiative order. Reverse initiative? Maybe reverse. I don't see it. Okay. So you can move between a world and its orbit. So if you're launching something from Earth or a planet or something, you can... And the way I distinguish these, so this rover is on the planet, this is out there. That's not clearly explained in the game, but it seems kind of intuitive. So you can go to world orbits in the same planetary system. So for example, you could go from Earth orbit over to the moon orbit or onto the moon itself. Not sure how much you distinguish between those two. That's really... If it's a rover, it's on the planet. If it's an orbiter, it's in the orbit. And you can go along arrows from a world orbit and a flyby box. So you could actually transfer from the flyby, and that's where you kind of drop down into one of these things. Anytime you do one of these moves, you have to make a check, though. In addition, you can do heliocentric transfers, which are sending a ship from one planetary system to another. Well, one planet's little mini subsystem or whatever, because it's a solar system. Okay, so in order to do that, what you do is you calculate the distance, which isn't too hard. It's really just like Earth is 0, so anything from Earth is the absolute value of the size away from it. For anything else, you count to Earth and then out, basically. You know, it's basically, if you counted this as 0, you could have it all in one string, but everything's counted from Earth. So you add that value together. At that point, you might have a transfer modifier in play. And there are other things that do too, but technology can give you this, and this gives you a quick calculation on the wheel. There are other things that can reduce your cost. For example, there is, if you're launching something with an LV from one location to another, and you have a heavier LV than it needs, each extra point of the LV subtracts 1 from the total distance that you have to go, which actually means you can shoot things pretty damn far, or pretty damn fast, like faster than they could reasonably go, but there's a limitation. You can only, wherever it's going to end up no sooner than the 1 box. Okay, and that's what you do. You calculate the amount of turns that it's going to take you to get there. That's what that number is. And I explained that really poorly overall. Okay, you have to be kind of careful here because, let me think, there's something weird. Can't think of what it is, sorry. Oh, yeah. For flybys, it's possible that they can end up during the exploration step. They take off again immediately then. And that can cause a little confusion as to, hey, can you search again? No, you can't. But the main confusion is not the rules, but remembering that this ship you just moved can't search again. And I tend to move in this direction, which is probably a problem. If I went in this direction instead, I would never have that problem because the flybys always have to go out from wherever they're at. Okay, the launch vehicles, at the start of the game, you're going to need to launch off Earth. You need a launch vehicle to start your things moving. And they're destroyed in general after moves unless you have a reusable launch vehicle, in which case you have a 75% chance of keeping it for the most part. Okay. Anytime you fire a robotic thing off, the first time it moves from anywhere, it is going to have to use a launch vehicle. It has to pick up its speed. If you're sending an orbiter or a rover, it's going from one planetary system to another, and it is never going to move from there. Flybys are a little different. They are going to continue on, but their whole deal with continuing on is it's going to be that way, and you can't change that factor. So all you can do is a little navigation thrusting. You can't change the major thrust. Now, you can launch a flyby to Mercury, and it does a slingshot and heads out. Slingshot around the sun, I guess, and heads back out into the depths. You can do the same with Venus. That's a little harder to explain, I think, with the navigational thrusters. It's unlikely you'd do that, but whatever. Okay. And when you launch a CV from the Earth, you're going to need an LV to pull it up in general, unless you have elevators. And yeah, okay. Whenever you move a ship, not on these tracks, but whenever you do a new decided movement, whether it's a heliocentric transfer, a movement between planet bodies, bodies within one planetary system, or I don't know what else to look at there. You have to roll percentile dice, and there's an engine failure chance. If you're launching something in with an LV, it's a shared value. Otherwise, each ship rolls alone for the most part. Well, probes go with whatever they're with. Okay. So the base engine failure rate is 5%. But CVs get to subtract their size value from it. You're being a little bit more careful because there's live humans on board. So 2s and 3s have a 3 or 2% chance of failure, and 4s have a 1, whatever. But once you get CV5, there's no more chance that it can fail. Right? Right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure because sometimes there's a minimum of 1 or whatever. If there's an engine failure, it destroys the entire ship. If it's an RE that you lose, and for REs this is just 5% too, so I mean, each RE that you lose to engine failure, or LV destroyed while transporting cargo alone, you draw 1 engineering check. And that just goes here, and it becomes one of your technologies. You've learned from your failure. If you lose a CV, on the other hand, this way, then you get you get 3 engineering tech markers because you lost crew, and it's a bigger deal. Okay. An LV that you fail to recover doesn't count, but whatever. All right, it's possible to intercept a fleet that's leaving your location. You have to be able to take an offensive action against it, though, which means embargo or war minimum, right? Plus you have to have weapons and all kind of other stuff. The interception attempt is announced after the moving fleet's engine failure check is complete, and this is done like a search. We haven't hit searches yet. Searches are how you fight. Okay. If you successfully intercept unmanned stuff, it's automatically destroyed. If it's got CVs, the intercepted ship can either stop moving or resolve it as if it's a combat search. Okay. So you can kind of avoid the interception with a CV. Temporarily. After any interception combats are resolved, the remaining ships in the intercepted fleets can complete their move or choose to cancel the move and make even a different move if they desire, which could result, I think, in another engine check and another interception. It doesn't say the engine check here. If there's a pirate in the flyby box, they will attempt to intercept any fleet with a CV. They'll leave their transfer box. Any CV leaving their transfer box, even fleets passing to make a heliocentric transfer, except if those fleets contain any CVs that have combat values. Combat takes place in initiative order. This is a step in the turn. Okay, first you have to find your enemy. In order to initiate a search, a fleet must be only unreserved CVs. You can't have any REs or bases. You have to have at least 1 ship with an attack or strike value. And unless you're searching for pirates, it has to be owned with by a player with foreign relations that allow him to take an offensive action. 1 at a time, each of your fleets can search for 1 enemy fleet in the same location. World, orbit, or flyby box, but not a numeric transfer box. If the fleet you're searching for contains a base on a world surface, you can initiate combat with it from orbit automatically. Both the searching fleet and the fleet being searched roll a search die, even if this fleet being searched for couldn't do a search. If there's no bases involved, the search is successful if either side rolls a 4 or less. If there's a base on one side, the search will be successful. You know where that damn thing is. But you still need the numbers because, like in WIF, search dice generate, combat advantages. You can see the WIF influence on this one. LVs and REs that are unaccompanied by a CV or base will be destroyed by a search. All right, after a search against a fleet containing a CV and or any bases, the other side has the option to offer surrender. When embargoing, you must accept any surrender. At war, you must accept base surrenders, but you can choose to exclude ships from the surrender, attacking them separately then, before resolving the base surrender. If you do this, you must exclude or include all the defending ships together, and then it becomes a separate battle. If you accept a defender's surrender, you destroy all the resources carried by the surrendering CV. You roll a die and destroy the roll's worth of resources stockpiled at a defending base. The attacker gets to choose what. You can take half the amount of each type of resources destroyed from CVs or bases onto your fleet, up to your fleet's cargo capacity. All the defending CVs are reserved. You didn't kill them, but they're tired. And you get a politics marker from the defender if they have one. A fleet that surrenders cannot be attacked by the same factions later in that turn. If the attacker rejects a surrender and none is offered, combat is initiated. Okay, what about those search die rolls that you made? At the start of combat, each side gets tactics points equal to the other side's search roll, modified by drone squadrons, policies, techs. Each side adds to its tactics points 1 for every full 7 points of enemy CV size. If the enemy contained a CV2, a CV4, and 2 CV6s, you would add a whole bunch of points, 18 points. Okay, but then that's divided by 7, which ends up as +2. Okay, this is because smaller fleets are more nimble. Whoever has the most tactics points subtracts the other side's tactics points from them, and that's the amount of points that they can use to modify the battle. Okay, each tactic point, you can spend one to make it a direct fire combat. If it's not spent, the combat will be a strike. The side with more tactics points can spend one to make the combat direct fire instead. You can spend 3 tactic points to avoid the combat. You can increase or decrease damage by spending 2 tactic points per point of additional damage you wish to inflict on the enemy, or decrease from yourself before anybody rolls damage. And you can select targets. You can spend 1 point to select a target to receive damage instead of your opponent picking which ships get a hit. Okay, then you resolve combat, and very much like WIF right there. If this is a direct fire, you can select any of your ships or bases that you wish to be screened. These cannot fire any attack factors in the combat, but they also can't be selected to receive damage unless tactic points are spent to select them as targets. However, once all unscreened ships and bases in your fleet are destroyed, all screened units are now eligible to receive damage. In a strike combat, if you have fighter drones, you decrease the damage inflicted on your fleet by 1 per fighter squadron in your fleet. If it's a strike combat and you have bomber drones, you choose if you wish to use your drone squadrons as fighters or bombers. If they're flown as, and you can split this up, the ones flown as bombers will increase the damage you inflict on your enemy in a strike by 1 per fighter squadron in your fleet. So your defending fighters will cancel out opponent's bombers, but only any excess will get through to increase the damage. Both sides can choose between fighters or bombers, and it's secret and simultaneous. Looks like actually you have to pick one or the other. I thought you could split them. Okay. Both sides simultaneously determine how much damage they inflict. You add up your combat values, you roll a die, and add 1 for each enemy unit in the combat after the first, and cross-reference the result with the combat table. What combat table? over here. I have not done this shit, so, you know. If you have 3 CVs, okay. So what you do is you combine the full value of either a direct fire or a strike, and you can see the direct fire does more damage, and that's how many points that you inflict. Yeah, this doesn't affect combat value, it affects actual damage, the bombers and fighters. The damage on each side is determined simultaneously, but it's resolved first on the side that initiated the search. That doesn't mean much. It's just one person has to choose first. Damage is inflicted one hit at a time per unit, with each side alternating picks on ships or bases. For strikes, the side inflicting the damage picks the first target. For direct fire, the side receiving the damage picks the first target. What does that mean? If you have tactics points, you can spend them to pick a target on either fleet instead of your opponent. Yeah. So there is an example of combat. I may have to look at that because the way this is worded, I don't understand what the fuck's going on. Let me see. The damage on each side is determined simultaneously. Damage is inflicted with each side alternating picks on. For strikes, the side inflicting damage picks the first target. I think it picks every target. Like, if I'm shooting, the person who did the damage picks which ship gets damaged in a strike, in a direct fire. No, in a strike. And direct fire, the person receiving the damage gets to pick. And you can reverse that with this point. I don't know if you can get into a bidding war with them. Only one person has tactics points. Okay. Each hit applies one damage marker to a CV or destroys an LV or RE. Only the defender could have an LV or RE. CVs are destroyed if they take damage markers equal to their size, like a CV2 is size 2. Bases without facilities are destroyed by a single point of damage. Otherwise, each facility can take damage markers, and when they're destroyed, they're downgraded into the next level down. For each resource hit, 2 resources are damaged or destroyed. Okay, post-combat. For each player-controlled CV you destroy in combat, you get victory markers based on the size of the ship. And it's not 1-to-1. It's 4 for size 7. These are earned even if you don't win or survive the battle. For each CV or base you lose in combat, though, you earn equivalent engineering tech markers. For each damage marker sustained by a CV in combat, the CV must check for recall and could earn a biology tech marker if it's recalled, but only a maximum of 1 per ship. I need to urinate. Combat effects. We got that. Blockades. If you have a fleet that could attack a base from orbit, you can declare a blockade. Blockading fleets have to be solely unreserved CVs. They must have combat values at least equal to that of the defense networks of the base they're blockading. When a base is blockaded, its tech and resource production is halved after all modifiers. Its settlements will decline instead of growing at the same rate, and it can't trade or receive a new trade marker. Furthermore, the blockading player gets $2 billion for each blockade during the production step, which isn't very valuable. I guess if you blockade it just before the production. Combat with pirates. If you're intercepted by pirates, you roll a die. You can either pay the pirates cash equal to the die roll, and that just comes off Earth and goes into their secret bank account. And the pirate leaves you alone. Or you can surrender or fight. If you surrender, it's the same as what happens here. I think the pirates may get some of the money from the destroyed resources, although that's not specified, it would kind of make sense. It is not specified, though, so for people who are like, if a rule doesn't say something specifically, it doesn't apply. Okay. Another option is you can pay double the amount of money to try to convince the pirate to go away. And they'll just disappear. You won't get any points for destroying the pirate. You can go into debt for paying off pirates. And I don't know how you mark that, but you use paper, I guess. If you choose to fight, you initiate combat as normal. They're not very big. You can also search for pirates and fight them, but only one pirate is ever included in combat at a time, the strongest one if there is one. Pirates roll for searches, but they spend tactics points to avoid combat with armed ships if they can. If forced to fight, they always attempt to choose direct fire combat, but don't otherwise spend tactics points. Players fighting pirates can choose how to apply all damage they sustain. Pirates that are damaged but not destroyed remain where they are with the damage markers. Destroying the pirate gets you half the accumulated pirate cash, and a victory marker and a politics marker. Okay, there's special rules for blockading and raiding NPF bases. You get the 2 billion for each base you blockaded during the production step. That's normal. During combat, you can try to raid NPF bases you are at war with. This works like an attack, except it's resolved on this table, and it just tells you what you get. It doesn't fight out the whole battle. I'm not sure. It's an attempt to simulate an attack on the base, because it does damage to the raiding fleet. And I'm not going to worry too much about it because we're not playing with that. But it looks like you'd be able to attack differently. Okay. Exploration. Okay. So, the exploration, this also is part of the game that I understand. Combat, not so much. Didn't do any of that. Didn't see any. Okay. For the exploration points for the game, you're going to be made up, well, let's look at robotic exploration first. You're going to be looking at the exploration value of the world, which is written on each little world thing. The exploration value of the RE that's doing the exploration, so in this case this orbiter, for example, would have a 2. If it fired a probe, it would have a 9, I think. Any tech and any modifiers from the world cards. Those world cards do contain some exploration bonuses on them. Okay. For each 10 points of exploration you get, you're going to get a tech marker of the type for the world. So for example, here you'd get physics, here you get biology, I don't see it. There's an engineering. Okay. Now, after you divide by 10 and take however many counters you're going to get for that, then whatever's left over, the remainder, you roll a die, and if you can get equal to or under that remainder, and if it's 0, it's no chance, then you get an additional chip. Okay. Rovers have to be on the surface of the world. Orbiters have to be in orbit. However, if they're orbiting the central world in a system, they're allowed to explore other planets, the little planetlings, the moons, whatever, in that system, with a -1 modifier to their chance. Flyby REs explore from the transfer and the flyby boxes. These are the transfer, this is the flyby. When they explore from a transfer box, they get a penalty equal to the level of the flyby box. And there's no limit to that. So you could be out at -18 or something. There's no point to that, but yeah, there are times when you might want to do an exploration far away. Once you hit the flyby box, though, you'll have no penalty. But if you do the search there, immediately after you make that search, you have to do a heliocentric transfer to another planetary system with a higher heliocentric transfer number. This means the flyby REs will only have 1 turn to explore a planetary system at full value. And remember, that's going in that direction. You are allowed to put yourself further along the numeric track with flyby REs. Instead of going to the lowest possible box for the transfer, you can choose to place the RE in a higher box to give you more chances to search. And from Earth, you can launch a flyby RE to either Mercury or Venus for an initial exploration. Probes are carried by rovers or orbiters, and they're deployed from the surface or orbit of the world to explore that world. Carried by flyby REs, they must be deployed from a flyby box in order to have any effect. But you can hit any world in the heliocentric orbit. Using a probe counts as its exploration for the turn. It'll be destroyed, but the carrier RE doesn't have to roll for any malfunctions. You don't have to use an RE for your first exploration, but it's often a good idea for the simple fact that if the RE is destroyed, it takes the probe with it. Probes don't benefit from spectrometers. Telescopes, we got these here. They're a little different. They can explore anywhere except Alpha Centauri, but they only add half the world value. So this would add 3 to the telescope's 2. That gives you 5. That's not very good, and it's got a chance to be destroyed. Not great. But if you're looking out here, where there's 9s, those go down to 5, and then plus 2 is 7. So that has a fair chance of being discovered. Okay. All right, that's the robotic exploration. Crewed exploration. Carriers that are CVs, sorry, not carriers, that have crew vehicles that have an exploration value can do crewed exploration on most worlds. They cannot do sun observation, they can't do gas giants, and they can't do deep space astronomy. Okay, I thought these could do gas giants. Okay. Interesting. Okay. I thought they could do it from above. You can also explore Earth orbit, which has its own exploration value, actually. What is that, bio? Yeah. Interesting. Okay. You add the exploration value of the world and the exploration value of the CV being used, plus any tech modifiers, and any modifiers from world cards for crewed explorations. The tech markers work the same way as the robotic explorations, except if your CV has a mobile laboratory, you get to roll 2 dice for the exploration and pick the lower, presumably. Okay. Now, if it's a robotic exploration and any individual tech marker you draw has a 3 or higher, I assume. I don't know if they added the... Interesting. You earn a depletion. And you can only get 1 depletion even if you draw multiple 3s. I don't know. They have 5s, but those might be... Okay. The way depletions are marked is with these number counters. So this has a 9 explore. If I discover it, I put an 8 there. And that indicates it reduces the chance that it can be explored anymore. And it also limits the number of times. Yeah, I'm a little iffy about whether it has to be exactly a 3. Like a 5 might not cause a depletion, even though it gives you more information. If you're doing a crewed exploration, as in one performed by a crew, not as in a rough one, the sum of the tech markers earned for the exploration is 3 or higher, you earn a depletion. I'm beginning to think that the value has to be exactly 3, even though there are 4s and 5s. When you earn a depletion, the exploration value goes down by 1. And you have to reveal the tech markers that you discover for exploration. And you might be able to decide, well, I don't have to reveal it unless it's going to be a depletion, but I don't know. Once you succeed in a depletion, if you have a mission, either your personal one or the shared one, that corresponds to the planet that you're looking at, you earn the mission. Exception being you can't earn it with telescopes. And you can't earn CV missions with robotic explorers. Then you draw a world card, possibly more, which you have the option to replace any current world cards with. Then you do a search for life. The way the search for life works is the base value is just a straight percentage. So in Mars, you would find life on a 12 or less percentile base. It's possible that the world card modifies that. We'll go to the search for life in a moment, and then you get a free politics marker. Now remember, when you complete the mission, you go to the mission completion routine. Okay. The search for life. So if you succeed the first time, you get the planet gets a signs of life marker. I don't know why I moved this. It's really not that exciting. Nor is it there. Well, I don't know where I have them hiding. I have a pile of these somewhere. Oh, here they are. Yeah. You get a signs of life marker, which comes with a +1 to the tech. I can't read that. Tech point production. Whatever type the planet gives already. Okay. Okay. And that'll be for anyone who's there. They get that bonus. You also get the technology signs of life. This is the only way it can first enter the game, is by coming up through being explored and discovered. Once it is, though, other people can research it, or they can explore for it, even in a place that you've explored for it. Once you have a signs of life, then you're allowed, okay, you roll, you get the life value. I didn't have any successes here. If signs of life hasn't been found there, yeah, you mark it. If there's already a signs of life there, right, you can't search for life on a world that already has existing life, and you must have signs of life tech in order to search for existing life on a world that has signs of life. So once signs of life is showing there, you can then, next time you get a depletion, you can actually search for life if you have the signs of life tech already. And if you succeed in that, you get the life tech, I believe. I don't know if there is one. Yep, signs of life, existing life. Yeah, which is then treated the same way. Someone else can research your papers or whatever and try to figure out more. Alternatively, they can actually do the work themselves. If you find signs of life, you get 2 biology tech markers, a victory marker, and a politics marker. If you find existing life, you get 4 biology tech, 2 victory markers, and 2 politics. The planet will also get additional production. Now, I don't think you gain anything except the technology for searching for it if someone else has already found it on that planet. Okay, let me take a break from my throat. Like just moving, things are a little bit more risky when you're doing the actual exploration. You roll percentile dice for either a malfunction or a recall. If it's robotic, it's a malfunction check. Your starting malfunction check is 30%, which can be modified by the atmosphere or the radiation, and by your tech. And if you succeed in the roll, the RE is destroyed. Probes are automatically destroyed, but you don't have to make a roll for the carrier, the RE. If you lose a non-probe RE from malfunction, you get an engineering tech marker, just like if you break it during movement. Crewed explorations, and sometimes after combat and production, have to check for recall. They roll percentile dice. Their base value for failure is 50%, modified by tech. And if they fail, they don't die, they go into reserve. They're tired, and they probably should be going home. They don't have to, though. If your CV is recalled as a result of exploration, production, or combat, you get a biology tech marker. Normally, they point out, normally when you're doing a search, you roll the percentile dice for your recall and the 1 die for the odd remainder. Okay, some other stuff I haven't seen. Once you have the tech space mining, which I never got, you can produce, I only played 2 turns, 2.5. You can produce resources using CVs equipped for production, located at worlds that have world cards. You can't use it at a world where you have a base, but other factions are allowed to. The world that you're producing at may be fully depleted, or not, but it must have a production value at least 1 for the resource type you're producing. You select the resource type to produce, you automatically produce 1 of that resource. Now you roll a die, subtract 1 if you have space or refining. If your modified die roll is equal to or less than the production value of the world for that resource, you get an extra 1. Okay? If you roll a modified 1 or 0, you produce another extra resource. Okay. World production values are never depleted, and you can only take resources that you can store on your producing fleet's cargo capacity. You can produce with 1 CV, though, and store the resources on another. After production with a CV, roll for recall, which might get you a biomarker. This is the, yeah, we're almost done. All right. During this step, you can also harvest an asteroid marker in a flyby box with an unrecalled CV by converting the asteroid into resources. To harvest an asteroid, your CV must be equipped to produce, and you have to have the tech space mining. Harvesting an asteroid works the same way as CV resource production, including the recall roll, except the harvested resource type and amount is determined by the asteroid harvest table. And you just see what you get and how much. Space refining doesn't modify this, and you get a victory marker each time you harvest an asteroid. Okay. Well, we're at the one last thing, and this is also during every turn, which is trade and base construction. All right. First, if there are bases that have trade markers that you're with, you can trade with them. Any resources you sell to the base are destroyed, and any resources you buy weren't previously in the game. They come from the box. The resources you sell can come from your base stockpile or any ship that you have there. Any resources you buy at your base are added to the base stockpile. You can trade with your own bases by spending cash or destroying resources. You can also trade with, I don't know how you get, I guess you spend cash on Earth. You can trade with bases controlled by another faction that you have neutral or better relationship using a fleet with the same location as the base. It doesn't have to actually be docked. If you do this, any resources sold must come from the fleet's cargo capacity, and any resources purchased go into it. If another player wants to trade with one of your bases, you can either refuse the request or demand that they pay you 1 billion tariffs for the privilege. Doesn't seem like you can just say, yeah, you can do it for free, and there's no free money transfers in this game. You can't give loans or anything. The type of, that's explained in the rule. You can make options on it. The type of resource available for trade and whether you can buy or sell at a base is indicated on the trade marker itself. And you remember what these look like. You'll be seeing one side or the other of what you can do. The maximum number of resources you can trade is restricted to the lesser of the number of resources you can trade based on your foreign relations, and the number of resources based on the base's settlements. This is unlimited for NPF. However many settlements indicate how many trade you can make. This increases the resource or tech production, and this doesn't matter at all. It just tells you how many people you have there. And then we have an example. Okay, well, didn't do any of that, but I did do building and expanding bases. So you can build a base in Earth orbit that can hold a world card, or any world that can hold a world card. To do this, you spend supplies from the cargo capacity of a CV at the indicated construction location. The CV has to be unreserved, have an exploration value, and all sup. Ooh, I didn't realize that. Shit. I cheated. I used this big old buddy to build a base. He can't. He can ship lots of stuff to the base, but yeah, interesting. Have an exploration value, and all sup must come from the cargo hold of a single ship. This is a big deal because some of these places have threes that are really early. So like the Russians, crap. Well, I don't know where the Russian CV, oh, the CV2 is on the board already. He's here. Yeah, he only carries 2, so he can only build a base in Earth orbit. Interesting. I don't know if there's anywhere else that little, but he's kind of an iffy ship other than giving you that first turn base build. Okay. The CV must be unreserved, have an exploration value, and all sup have to come. Okay. And the cost to build a base is indicated on the world solar system tile, and it can be reduced by certain tax, which might make that guy a little bit more useful. In this step, you can also build and expand facilities. Even if you just built the base that turn, you can raise one level of facility on the base each turn, and they have their costs right on the counters. So for example, this would cost 3 ore. This would cost, looks like 1 ore and 1 supply. And you have to have built all the previous levels to expand. Then you can buy terraforming points, which go over here. If you have the tech, I didn't. There's no limit to how many you can purchase in a turn, but they increase in cost by 1 sup for each point. This reminds me of a silly pun. When I first saw sup, I immediately asked, what's up? I mean, in my own head, without really thinking how funny that would sound. And it's absolutely fucking hilarious. Just trust me on that. No, it really was in my mind at the point. I was just like, what's up? Wait. Yeah, my mind does weird things. Okay. And you mark the terraforming points on here for the planet. That's a shared value. Everybody's terraforming together. And the points for terraforming are having settlements on a world that's terraformed. So it doesn't really help you to be the guy who finishes the terraforming. Okay, And then you check to see if you ended the game. And you move the turn marker forward. If it ends up on a decade, you move the decade forward and you do the full production routine. Okay. Let's talk about the scenarios. First of all, I'm playing the campaign, which is what the game is based on. And there's a solo version of it where you play, let's see, count your score at the end of the game as usual, but subtract 3 points for each turn the game lasts past 2045. Okay. I believe the campaign scenario just plays till whenever you want to end it. Right? 8 or more hours. Oh, starting in 2145. 2145 is not when it's supposed to end, so I don't know. Starting in 2145, roll percentile dice for the end game check. It starts at 1% and it'll increase by 1% each year. And the game ends automatically in 2169 if it hasn't ended before that. This is just to make it so you can't, do an end of the game cash-in of some sort or another. I'm not sure how likely that is, but victory is your points. Okay, so the points are your victory markers are 1 each. Interstellar colonizer techs. Well, that's these. And if you have all 3 of them, you get a lot of points. They're 15 each otherwise. Okay. If you have the most settlements on any given terraformed world, you get points for being the person who has the biggest settlements, biggest colony. Each of your missions is worth its points. Alpha Centauri is worth 15 points if you explored it with a CV, but only 5 with an RE. You could get both, though. The number of settlements in different locations, they have a multiplier on it. So, the further out you go, the better it is. The number of settlement points on terraformed worlds adds additional points to that settlement value. Each facility level is worth a point. You get a penalty for each technology you did not succeed in developing. You get 1 point for every 20 unspent tech marks at the end of the game, and 1 for every 5 unspent political. And then you get a point value for the size of ships available. Okay. There's a series of events. These are triggered, I believe, starting in 2100. No, at the start of each economic phase. 2100, you get double events. We won't look at those. I want them to be kind of a surprise. There's different scenarios as well. And again, I think the solitaire scenario is mistaken. It should be 2145 when the game could actually end, and not 2045. Okay. Race for the Red Planet. This is one where you start with nothing, and the goal of the game is to basically set up 20 settlements on Mars. Everybody's completely at war during it, essentially. Clash at Titan. I haven't looked at all of these. 20 settlements on Titan. This goes all the way out to Saturn and its moons, but not as far. Full battle capabilities in Titan. And again, it looks like you don't start with everything. Now let me see. Maybe it says something about the starting setup. The scenario, you get the text in that column. Yeah, I think anything is going to be specified in the scenario. So here you get tech level 3. So you'd have tech level 3 in all columns. Okay. Or in all rows. Incoming. This is a cooperative game. Earth's discovered a gigantic asteroid, and this one is one of these here. The asteroid is big, and you've got to shoot it up in order to prevent something from dying, right? Yeah, you can shoot it up. So there's 3 ways to deal with the asteroid. You can explore it, and you reduce the strength by 1/10 of the exploration value plus 3. Roll for fractions, yeah. You can tow the asteroid during the exploration step. Each CV that tows the asteroid reduces its strength by the size of the CV. It must be unreserved, and you become reserved immediately after that. And you can fire the asteroid during the exploration step. You roll on the direct fire table using an unreserved CV. You reduce the strength by the damage, but if you roll a 1 or 2, you increase the asteroid's strength because of fragments. And it's just going to be in different areas. I don't know what it's going to do in this. There's an invasion, which is another co-op. Players build a fleet of up to 7 CVs to fight the invader. It's a size 25 CV with a combat value of 50. Yeah, it's pretty potent. You do not want this to happen, or the incoming necessarily in the campaign game. Olympus Mons. Are these marked? I don't know if this one does not appear to be there. Sun out to Jupiter. You got to terraform Mars as a cooperative. All players are considered allies and share technologies, etc. Have at least 40 settlements there by the end of the game. And the time changes. Ex Machina. Group goes out to Pluto. Malicious artificial intelligence takes over the station, and you're going to fight the AI who's using the Japanese. It's also, no, this one's competitive. The worlds are partially explored. I don't know. There's a player for the AI, so. Rebellion. Mars declares independence. I don't know. But there are plenty of interesting little things. So this one, for example, the game end and victory conditions are the same as the campaign, which is kind of interesting. There's some optional rules in here. The modified starting exploration for 4 to 5 player game, 6-7 player game, it doesn't deplete. Depletions aren't as painful. You get more stuff, I guess. Interplanetary missiles, you can fire a missile at a base from other planets. Aggressive pirates, when you roll for pirates, you get an NPF CV to a flybot. Basically, you get non-player factions throwing military goods out into the pirate thing. Utopia, you can never embargo or go to war. For the more Euro-friendly play, embargo only, you can't go to war, no pirates, no events. Futuristic start gives you a jump start in the game. That's about it. There's a fairly significant discussion of some of the actions in play, in fact most of them, which I found kind of very helpful to playing my first play. I used it to guide, in particular, the North American and Russian player were gone into detail. I used it to guide their actions, and they seem appropriate to me at the time. They give player's notes for everything, and then some copies of the trees. Okay. What I've seen so far is, yes, it is a more Euro type high frontier. There's no question about that. It takes away a lot of the detail You're not building your spaceship out of spare parts that you found that don't really necessarily work together. You're not trying to figure out, the minutia of can I carry enough water to get to where I'm going, and as it burns, can I calculate out that my speed is going to increase and all kind of crap like that? Because basically you pre-play your launch in High Frontier. Like, you could do that. You don't have to worry about stopping at different places to try to refuel or anything like that. There's just a whole bunch of stuff that the level of detail that's just not here. In addition, the level of detail in terms of the composition of the ships, the fact that you're putting them together by parts, the fact that you can get cool technologies that you can build in only one place, all of that's not part of this. This is just about sort of that pushing forward, getting the exploration. It looks very random, though. You're going to get something okay, because you get, tech markers when you go into reserve or when you destroy a ship or whatever. But that's not what you're aiming for, right? Success gives you better advantages than failure. Failure does give you something, though, so there's a little bit of a catch-up mechanism in that. One of the things that I noticed before these tech charts, pain in the fucking ass. Basically, they're not easy to read, and the information is all tracked over here. Now, playing it solitaire, it's probably actually better than playing it opposed, trying to use the tech chart alone. And that's where this shit comes in particularly helpful. I think I would have rather each player have, given the quality of the components and everything they put, I don't know if like 7 laminated double-sided pieces of marker resistant material would have been cheaper than putting these boards out. But something along these lines I think would be a lot easier for a bunch of people playing. One thing I was considering doing before I saw these, and I don't think I can use this simply because I would basically have to print out 7 copies of it myself and then track them all, and I would get fucking confused by that. This is more complicated to deal with than there it is, Age of Renaissance over there, where I do keep track of all 6 players on one sheet of paper. I was thinking about trying to put all the modifiers on here. You also have modifiers for each group here, and it's not just the tech tree. You have the policy tree to take into account too. This is painful. And your ships, all your ships are different. Yeah, you have the counters in front of you for those at least, but there's a lot of shit to try to capture and understand all at once. And I am damn sure I'm going to make a ton of mistakes. Some of them probably with the rules, some of them with simply, not being aware of what's going on. Hey, I forgot what tech somebody had. I'm expecting that, and I'll just say that's part of the cost that I'm going to have playing this, and I will never be able to overcome that without a better presentation of the materials. This might help, but I've played Age of Renaissance and forgot. And I'm always forgetting my bonuses there, and the sheets for that are perfectly fine. There's just too much to keep in mind, too many little modifiers and differences when you're looking at a game that has so many different little special abilities that aren't just clearly sitting there in your face. I mean, it's one thing like in Dominion, I can see my abilities that are out or whatever, or some other games. But when you start getting to complex tech trees in board games, I got problems with those. They don't work. Me and them don't mix well together. Even Advanced Civilization. I could handle the old Civ, but Advanced Civilization, there were just too many of the cards that did something. I could keep track of 4 or 5 things. And it's a pity, because concept-wise, I love tech trees, but yeah, too often I forget what my advantages are and my bonuses are. So I expect that to be a pain point for me, but we'll see. All right, let's send this one up, and maybe I'll get to start tonight.